And as you're joining in, hello, hello. Nice to see all of you. This is an international collective, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone as you're joining. We're so excited to have all of you here, and we'll just take a moment for everyone to arrive. This is our first Women Writers Collective and Yoga Therapy, and this has been in the works for quite some time now. And so this feels really exciting to get to be in community for the first time. I'll just wait a moment to share some of the logistics and announcements until people arrive. We'll give it a few more minutes. So if there's anything that might be helpful for you to land in this space, I have some tea here. And this is just going to be a conversation together, just sharing. So if there's anything that would feel helpful for you to land, we'll maybe take a moment to gather that. I see some familiar faces in here and some new faces. So I am Shawnee Thornton Hardy, and our wonderful featured authors today are Pitman and Leigh Leibel. And I'm really excited to get a chance to interview them and to share their amazing resource, their book that they've written. And the way that we'll do our meeting today is I'll introduce, we'll share a little bit about Anne and Leigh, their bios, and we will have our interview. And then at the end of our interview together, we will have an opportunity for Q&A, and we'll turn the recording off and have people ask questions, curiosities about the book. And then we have an offering at the end for those who are here live. So we encourage you to stick around so you can receive that offering at the end of the meeting today. And our meeting will go an hour and 15 minutes, even though I think in the advertisement it said an hour and 30 minutes. So maybe we will just begin by taking a moment to arrive together. Do a short grounding and arriving in the space and community. I'll just invite you to take a moment to notice your contact with your feet and your seat. Sensing into the ground beneath you, sensing into the support beneath your seat. And noticing anything that gives you a sense of being here in the present moment. That might be through the way that you can sense the contact with your feet and seat, or any way your senses are connecting to the present. Maybe just taking a moment to notice how it feels to be here in community. And just notice if there's any curiosity about extending your breath just a bit longer. So as you breathe in, letting the breath come in, and as you breathe out, letting that breath be a bit longer on the exhalation. A gentle inhale and a long, slow exhale. Then I'll just invite you to take one hand to your heart center, the other hand to your heart center, and we'll just set an intention as community. An intention of connection, an intention of learning, an intention of curiosity. And I just want to take a moment to express gratitude for all of you being here and joining us today. And when you're ready, we'll just let the hands come down. And Leigh and Anne, I'm going to introduce our amazing authors, but I first just want to share this is our first time gathering together. And this came about from a small collective of women writers at the Sitar conference that and we had this beautiful connection of a small community of yoga therapists at the, I think it was 2 years ago or two sitars ago in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we were so inspired by each other's work and each other's efforts in writing our books and the process that goes into that. And that inspiration led to us having conversations around ways that we could support each other's work, ways that we could lift each other's voices up, ways that we could get our work out into the community. And so it was a very organic process. And as I said, it's been in the works. I know for at least 6 months, maybe even longer than that, maybe even a year. I don't remember, but it's been quite some time that we've been meeting, gathering, collaborating, and it just feels really beautiful to be here collaborating with one another and supporting each other. And we're grateful, excuse me, for all of you being here and in support of us as well. So I'm going to read Leigh and Anne's bio, and then we'll get started in connecting. I do want to share that we won't be doing any Q&As during the interview, and we won't be, responding to the chat, although you're welcome to, share in the chat if you'd like. And at the end will be the opportunity for us to get to do a Q&A and share in that way. Okay, so we'll let everyone know when that's coming up. So I'm going to start with Ann Pitman. And Ann Pitman, I know, is located in Ottawa, Canada. She is a CIAYT, a pain care certified, it says, but I don't know. Anne, I'll let you share more about that. And she's a co-director of the School of Embodied Yoga Therapy, the co-author of Yoga Therapy Across the Cancer Care Continuum, which is the beautiful book we're talking about today, and an associate professor at the University of Ottawa. She is a research consultant, program coordinator, and certified yoga therapist at the Ottawa Integrative Cancer Center, offering evidence-informed, one-on-one care for those experiencing shock, grief, anxiety, depression, treatment side effects, trauma, and persistent pain. Her Year to Breathe program, which is a beautiful program, I'm actually in that currently, is a year-long svadhyaya practice for yoga practitioners, excuse me, teachers and therapists to befriend their own grief and mortality, resource a love of life, and widen their availability and authenticity in professional practice. At Bad Dog Studio, Anne offers slow inquiry-based, non-insistent practice, workshops, and co-regulated compassionate care for the multitude of human shatterings and life's mysteries. She regularly speaks at medical, complementary healthcare, and yoga therapy conferences on diagnosis, shock, the unrecognized grief of cancer, and the tender practice of accompanying people facing their dying days. Leigh Leibel is an MSc, PhD, CIAYT, a clinical researcher in integrative oncology at Columbia University Irving Medical Center. She earned a Master of Science in Yoga Therapies from S. Vyasa University, India, where she's completing her PhD and trained in cancer prevention and control at the NIH NCI. Co-editor of Yoga Therapy Across the Cancer Care Continuum and contributor to the Comprehensive Integrative Oncology textbook and Yoga Therapy Foundation's Tools and Practice. She serves on the board of trustees of the Society for Integrative Oncology, co-hosts the SIO Integrative Oncology Talk podcast, and co-founded its Yoga Special Interest Group internationally. She works with Project Pink Blue in Nigeria to advance cancer care and survivorship in Africa. Wow, amazing work. Just reading the bios of both Anne and Leigh. Anne and Leigh, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Is there
Oh,
anything else that feels important to share about your work or,
I
yeah,
don't, do you ever get used to hearing a bio of yourself? It's such an odd thing, isn't it? It's like, so I'm slightly distant from this person now. It's fun.
yeah, yeah. And Leigh, where are you joining from?
So I'm in Connecticut right now, right outside of New York City.
Okay, wonderful. Well, this
Yeah.
is the book we're going to be talking about here. And I want to say that I feel so honored to get to be the person that's interviewing Anna and Leigh because this topic is very dear to my heart. I am myself a cancer survivor, and this has been an incredible resource for me personally, just a heart resource and also an amazing resource for family members and my own clients that I work with. And so I feel very honored to get the opportunity to interview and be part of this and to be part of our first gathering together. So
Thanks, Sean, for taking it on. Thank you for taking it
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having us. This is so fantastic to be together.
Yeah, it really does feel amazing to be here in our first meeting together. So I'm going to start with our first question about your book. And Anne and Leigh, we're just going to make this a authentic conversation, and we'll just let it lead us where it's meant to lead us. But the first question I want to start with is, why did this book need to be written?
Why? Why? This is my family
Why?
for
We're
time.
starting with the
Why?
why.
Why you write this book? It's my family. Well, it really was, I suppose, happenstance, you could say. Leigh and I were asked to lead the CICs at Sitar. I think was it 2018 or
218, yeah.
yeah. And we didn't know each other at all. And we were thrown into the room and we got to ask some people to speak about their work in yoga therapy. And, it was, bossy as I am, I'll speak for myself. I was really curious about what's actually happening in the room, what's happening in that hospital room, what's happening in that infusion room. How is yoga therapy really showing up all over the world? And we had some great speakers then. And as it would happen, there was a publisher in the audience, and Serena, who was with Handspring, and she came up afterwards. It's one of those moments you think, you could have turned at that moment. We could have just gone early for coffee.
Yeah.
But she said, I think this would be a great book. And that's how it started, and it rolled. And it rolled through the pandemic, and we're really fortunate to have people join us. We put out an international call, right, Leigh, for
Yes.
in all of the yoga places we could find, and asked people to send stories about what they do, like what really happens. What is yoga therapy? Is it different in different places in the world? Are people doing mostly outpatient? Are they in hospitals? And of course, then it turned into being online, very much so, and it still is in oncology,
Mm.
very strongly online. And so we just rolled with that and somehow got through it. It was very challenging. Over to you, Leigh.
Yeah, it certainly was. Well, I couldn't have had a better co-editor than Ann Pitman. She was amazing. And this book took years, and we met every single Thursday morning for literally years. As Ann said, this all started back in 2018 when we were co-chairing the cancer yoga and cancer segment for the sitar that year. And then when Serena walked up to us and said, "This is a book," it was like amazing. Like that's a dream. Everybody says, "Oh, I want to write a book," and here's an editor, commissioning editor that came up and sort of said, "I love this. I want you to put this into a book." So I want to thank Shawnee actually for sharing that you're a cancer survivor, and I am also. And so that was one of my motivations for being so passionate and wanting to get the book out there. Because when I was diagnosed and I was going through my treatment, I was a yoga practitioner, but I needed someone to really take care of me during my yoga. And there just really weren't resources back then. And so that's one thing that Anne and I really wanted to do with this book is to create a beautiful resource for yoga therapists, for yoga teachers, certainly for our allied healthcare professionals, the doctors and the nurses and the social workers and everyone who helps support people with cancer at all stages of care. Um, yeah, and then the pandemic hit, COVID.
Hmm.
That was something.
Yeah, it was brutal in all ways. As I remember, we had sort of a vision of yoga practitioners, yoga therapists, walking around with this book and handing it to oncologists, or handing it to a physiotherapist, or handing it, in integrative oncology, because it still wasn't being spoken so much of how does yoga therapy fit into this, and are we prancing into the hospital asking everyone to calm down, or how do we work with other practitioners? And I'm very proud of that, because it is a way that we can work as yoga therapists very much in community in oncology, and be very appreciated by other people on the team. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Anne and Leigh. I mean, I think you both answered the second question that I was going to ask you, and that is, who is this book for?
Mm.
And you're sharing in terms of getting it in there into integrative health. But is there any other community of people that you want to talk about in terms of who you wrote this book for, or expand on that?
Well, we did write it as a textbook for yoga in integrative oncology, for sure. But I think it's been a bit surprising that people who are facing cancer are also reading this book. And I'm not sure if I really expected it to be in that way. But what I think what they're really finding is those stories are bring you in to how it is, the shock of it, the absolute roller coaster of treatments, the fear of recurrence afterwards that really no one was talking about at that time. And there is work on end of life in this book too. And I'm very proud of that, particularly, that it is a continuum. People get off the continuum, but they find in these stories themselves,
Mm,
their fear, their worries about this, because it's a strange thing that people feel so lonely when they have cancer. And
Mhm.
there is at least where I live, there is a cancer culture, which it can be a little bit, cheerleader like a little bit insistent on only think positive and carpe diem and all the things. Not that that's a problem, but that's not how it is.
Yeah.
And we wanted this book to be able to speak to the holistic work that we do and how we can support people to be where they are when they're in shock, when they're feeling angry, when they're very scared, when they're very joyful, because strangely, that happens too in the continuum. That some of these um, ways of being can dissolve when you have a cancer diagnosis, and people often do a lot of soul searching, and can be a very provocative time for yoga work, particularly, I
Mhm.
think.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
go
so
ahead, Leigh.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Shawnee. That's so well said, and it's just beautiful. And really, when we started writing this book, people were always saying, well, what's the protocol for
Mm.
breast cancer? Like, just tell me what poses we should be doing. And so, what Anne and I really wanted to do, and this is what set the book, made it unique, was that it's looking at the cancer care continuum from diagnosis, actually prevention, but diagnosis, active treatment, survivorship, living with chronic disease, palliative care, end of life. So really, and it's not linear because you can go one step and then come one step back. And we really, as Anne so beautifully described, it's a unique journey, and there are no two experiences that are the same. And so when we did this open call and we had 38 or 40 contributors, everybody brought something so gorgeous to the conversation. Everybody was doing different things. And we were so surprised when we saw all of the proposals. We're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really true. It was really different, but if you remember, Lee, there were a couple of practices that almost everyone did. Do you remember
Yeah,
this?
yeah,
And so these are I call them O negative practices now. They seem to be useful for everyone. But the one that I'm thinking of right now is that so many people talked about Brahmari practice.
yes,
It was unbelievable. We were looking through all these things. I'm like, wow. And it wasn't just like, well, this is a practice that all yoga therapists do. It was that it was embedded in the need of the person, whether it was because their throat was so tight because they're terrified, or they're looking to have a voice with their doctors. Like it just seems to span across so many practices. So there were some of those too.
That's beautiful. I want to speak to just the mention about um, those who are on the cancer care continuum. As you mentioned, Anne, that you were surprised by, those who may not be yoga therapists, but who are practitioners that were reading the book, and the speaking to the feeling of not feeling alone in the world in this experience. And I think this book is such a beautiful, as you were saying, you go into the book and you recognize, oh, there are so many other people that are going through the same thing. And it truly is a resource in that way of recognizing that, well, I'm not alone. And so it's such a wonderful resource with practices, but also a beautiful resource for those who have gone through the experience of cancer diagnosis and are, now on the other side of whatever they may be at or in the midst of it. And so I just want to speak to that as being someone who read the book and felt like, oh, this really resonates with me. And I think that's the beauty of books. I think that's the beauty of writing books, is that we speak to other human hearts. And those who are reading the books really have this sense of, "Oh, there are others in the world that are experiencing or going through the same things or have gone through the same things." And I really love how you spoke to that. Uh, Curious about new concepts that you integrated into the book, or I'm also curious about, and I think this may have been already answered, but was this a theoretical book? Was this a personal book? Coming from both you and Anne and you, Leigh, what was your perspective and I'm already hearing that there was a personal experience for both of you. Um, but maybe just speaking a little bit to that around the theory and the personal element of it. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's so provocative. I was thinking as you were speaking about yoga therapy and yoga therapists and yoga practitioners, and I remember writing the chapter on yoga therapy and just terrified, honestly. I mean, I was terrified to write that chapter because I wanted so badly for yoga therapists to be proud of it, to feel like yeah, that's what we do, and so that I think was one of my motivations was to really speak to the beauty of this work and how unique it is and how flexible it is, with regard to other people. You could maybe the psychotherapist is working with your client too, and you can move over into the more physical work or the spiritual work. And so that comes to mind first with regard to is it a practical book? It first of all wanted to be a book about how yoga therapy could be visible in oncology. And it is, like I think that we're very lucky, Leigh, you can speak more to this for sure, that there's more research, I think, in yoga therapy and oncology, probably than other, maybe mental health, it's a tug of war, but it's really happening and it's strong. And, I was very lucky to have Leigh as my co-editor, given her expertise in the theoretical part too, with regard to cancer and all of the treatments, et cetera. So Leigh, maybe you can talk about.
Yeah, no, I think, it's so interesting because I think Anne and I were, we come from such different backgrounds with our yoga and with our application of yoga, and we just complemented each other so beautifully. Like there's so many parts of that book that I could not have written, Anne. I mean, they're just gorgeous. So I was just really focused since I'm embedded in an academic medical center in the cancer center in the hospital setting. I was really coming at it from an evidence-based, practice-informed educational perspective and really going hard with that. And Anne was just so beautifully balancing me out. And yeah, I think that's what makes the book so special.
Mm. Yeah, what a beautiful partnership. It just makes me think the theoretical piece and then the, more poetic piece of these practices, and what a beautiful partnership that you two could bring your brilliant minds into this book and share in that way. Because I think that the research is so important, and also um, the practical application of this that those who are reading the book can connect to on more of that personal or emotional level. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm imagining that's true for the people who read the book, yeah, that they might be
Mhm.
more drawn to one or another. But we really wanted yoga therapists and yoga practitioners also to have this information, because, well, for those of you who have opened the door in oncology on the internet, it's wild. It's just a wild, wild thing. And people are wondering and going, how do I even think about this? And so we wanted to have that evidence-based as absolutely foundational. And also, I suppose I hope this can be heard in the most compassionate way, bring some guardrails to the work that often people see as, um, you know, let's just say that there's a lot of wild things on the internet. We didn't want that. We wanted to pull it in and make sure that we can walk proudly with this evidence-based work that we do, but not miss the poetry of the philosophy, and how it's so embedded in what we do. It's like we have this, jewel in our pocket. And, how do we walk with that in such a good way with deep respect to the roots of yoga in a healthcare setting?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I remember when we were working on our outline, originally we did not have the chapter on cancer, like the background of cancer. And as we started to put everything together, it felt like something was missing. Like we really had to share that knowledge and that foundation of, what is cancer? Um, what are the treatments? What are the side effects of it? So that there was really something that all of these beautiful stories of what was going on in the room with the yoga therapist and the person with cancer could really sit on, so that yoga therapists could really understand a little bit more and put it into perspective.
Mm.
Good.
I'm wondering if you're both would be willing to expand on the chapter where you gathered these voices of the different yoga therapists. And I mean, I think it's just such a beautifully rich chapter that just shows application. And, as you mentioned, the sharing, as you said, it was an international call. So this is internationally, it's not just in one country. I'm curious about if you'd be willing to just expand on that a bit. I think that's such a rich chapter in your book.
It's where the magic is. Chapter 6. Anne, you wanna start off on that?
Why don't you go ahead, Leigh?
So I think we had contributors from 5 different countries. We were really, when Anne and I started out, we really wanted this to be um, so inclusive, and we put out the open call and invited everyone that was working with a person with a cancer diagnosis at any stage, whether they were into survivorship or whether they were just newly diagnosed and going through treatment. And the surprise actually is we had so many people apply to write the end of life section, because when we put the call out, we specifically broke it out into the continuum and said, please submit a proposal for diagnosis, treatment, end of life, remission, survivorship, no evidence of disease. And how many people? I think the majority were end of life.
Well, absolutely, it knocked me out. I don't,
Yeah,
because so much of my work is at end of life, and I was like, over to you. There were so many
yeah.
people who are already doing this work, and as a result of doing this book and the writers and the SIO, we're aware of so many more yoga therapists now than we were before. So it almost requires another book. But
I was just thinking it needs to be updated. So
it
much, yes, so much research has happened around yoga and
Um,
cancer in the past couple of years since the book was published, and specifically the clinical practice guidelines that are issued by ASCO, SIO, which is the American Society of Clinical Oncology, and the Society for Integrative Oncology, NCCN, National Comprehensive Cancer Network, and ESMO, which is the European Society of Medical Oncology. So all of these leading cancer organizations have done research around integrative therapies or supportive care therapies in oncology. And yoga is huge. It's unbelievable. So we have new pain guidelines that recommend yoga. We have new anxiety and depression guidelines recommending yoga. We have fatigue guidelines, and there's the sleep study is being looked at right now. And so I'm sure that yoga will play a role in that as well.
that's so exciting to hear you sharing that, Lee. And I'm also excited thinking about you two considering maybe writing another book. And you segued so so I know it's maybe not right now. We know it's quite an undertaking, but you segued so smoothly into the next question that I was going to ask, which is when you author a book, you're in the moment of writing, and then you write the book, and then I know as an author myself, then you think, oh, I would have changed that, I would have made that different, I want to go back and add this. And I know, because in the cancer world, I mean, research is and not only research but treatments are evolving and changing so rapidly. What are some things that you might, after having written the book, that you may have wanted to add, or you might have wanted to change, or is there anything different after you wrote the book that felt important?
Mm. Well, it's crazy making to write a book, isn't it? Like it is crazy making because it's solid and it's gone and that's it. And yeah, the research is always changing and we are also evolving as therapists. Uh, I I mean, I'm not too troubled about all of that because it stands, the test of time in a lot of ways. Um, I just want to hear more, I'm amazed at what people are doing in the realm of oncology. So there's just been more and more storytelling afterwards. It's almost like this began a way of us talking and a way of us presenting the people that we're working with, because it really wasn't meant to be about the yoga therapist, but the person who's in the room. And how do we really listen? Even by writing and reading, how do we really listen to what's happening for them? And, really how terrified they can be. And what kind of support do they need then? And what's the language that really meets them where they are? For a lot of us in this room, our clients are telling us things that they're not telling their friends and their family and their doctors because they're trying to protect them, or they're trying to be only positive. So it's a very tender experience to walk with these people, as you all know. And I there's just more richness that comes from that. So I'm not sure that I feel like anything's particularly left out. I just want more stories, more stories of all the people in this room who are also working with people that way. What about you, Leigh? What do you feel like?
Yeah, so, you know, this was my first book, and we were commissioned to write it. And so the commissioning editor had a vision for what she knew she could sell, and she knew what her target audience was. And so I think Anne and I, if we were doing it just on our own and self-publishing it without a word count or without, a certain number of, charts and pictures, we would have created a very different book. Do you think that's right, Anne?
Yeah, the word count was
It was
so,
brutal.
it
It
was,
was brutal.
we're just
And
like, it's just like trying to cut down
yeah,
what has to leave, what has to go. And these
yeah,
stories are so rich, and the
yeah,
information is so needed that Lee brought, and the how yoga therapy really could become more visible. What do you leave out? That was hard.
yeah.
It's hard to
And
say.
then, yeah, and then the other thing that happened was as we were writing the book, my fiance was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, like in the middle when I'm writing the book. And so being a caregiver during that next 9 or 10 months, my next book, I would approach it a little bit differently, understanding what the families go through, what the friends, the caregivers. Yeah, it's not just the person with the cancer diagnosis, it's everyone who is loving them and supporting them and driving them to the to the appointments and sitting next to them in the infusion chair. So I think definitely I would come at it a little bit differently. Um, I also saw something in the chat that I just want to comment on about fighting cancer, the war imagery, and that works for some people, absolutely, but some people it doesn't. And so, that came from the 1970s with President Nixon, where he said, we've got a war on cancer. We're going to find a cure for cancer. And it's kind of hung on. And so one thing that I do in clinic is if someone is not comfortable with that imagery, because, when you think about war or battling, you tense up and you're engaging your sympathetic nervous system. So, I always look at yoga as introducing the compassion and the loving kindness and the agency and taking care of yourself as another way of positioning the cancer experience.
Mm,
Mhm.
beautiful. And that's so gorgeous. And it's reminding me too that we so wanted to um, present ways of working with people right at diagnosis and before diagnosis and right at diagnosis, so that because in my clinical work, I was seeing people who were finished with their treatment and were, um, well, PTSD reigned,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
and
Yes.
they really just didn't have time to stop and think or breathe or anything. And so, so much of the work that we can bring to people is that pause, is just to go, okay, let's just pause a moment and notice how we're doing right now. Because that treadmill or that wheel of cancer, it just rolls. Once you're in, it can go quite quickly and with very little break or rest in it. And yoga in oncology tends to be the one that brings the rest. Yeah. And it also brings engagement. So when people come into the cancer center, I sometimes talk about, well, there are things that you can do where people take care of you. And how is that? Like what's your history of receiving care? How does that feel to you? And then there are things that you can engage in. And yoga brings some of both, right? It has that quality of self-care and giving yourself care that you can also receive, but you're engaging. You're not it's not really passive to enter into these practices, even though they can be so soft and lovely, but you're bringing yourself toward the experience of having cancer or towards your fear. And it's very, very powerful. And
Mm.
it also needs accompaniment, I would say, that yoga therapists primarily use their presence. Of course, their regulated nervous system, of course, all of their practice, of course, of course, of course. But their willingness just to be present with someone who is in the throes of the wildness of it is uh, so unique and beautiful.
Mm. Yeah. And I'll just add one thing that Anne and I were very, very adamant about was to honor yoga's Indian roots. And I think many times when you bring these beautiful yogic practices into a clinic, maybe you lose the Sanskrit words, maybe you lose, a little bit of the authenticity of what the practice truly is, which is a mind, body, soul, spirit um, discipline and a science. And it really addresses yoga, addresses the whole person, mind, body, soul. And that's why it is so beautifully poised to come into clinic and work with people with a cancer diagnosis, because the cancer affects every aspect, every domain of being. And there's something there, yoga, for everyone, even in ICU. You can do some guided imagery at the bedside. You can do some gentle breathing. You can do it in the waiting room. You can do it in the infusion center. You can do yoga interventions and, before you're going in for your scan or your radiation, even teaching someone how to breathe when they're going in for chest radiation, so they can lie still and they can hold their breath, and help with their scan anxiety.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is often interpreted as life and death cancer. Maybe it isn't entirely. There's all kinds of wonderful progression in that, but the person often takes it in as a life and death situation. And in that way, it's a little bit different, than working. My past work was working with injury, initially, working a lot biomechanically. And this, people are up in the middle of the night, it takes them to what is the meaning of my life?
Mhm.
What am I doing here? What does it mean if I die? Even if it's stage 1 cancer, that can still happen. And these are, wrestlings, they're so human, and I think they need a place to land, a place where they can be spoken and really held uh, with great tenderness.
Yeah, I'm so touched by what you both just shared. And the thing that comes to mind is the mention about post treatment, the phase of getting past all of the treatments and the shock of the diagnosis, and that you're just in survival during that time. There's no capacity to really process until you get to that place. And the importance of how these practices are a continuum, just in your title, even going into a scan, an annual mammogram, what comes up in your system, that in your physiology around that you may not even be conscious about, and how these practices truly are a continuum through your lifespan, truly. And what a beautiful resource this is in that way, to have these practices to not only preventative, but also to help to maintain some sense of well-being after you've experienced this, because it is something that stays in your system and comes up over and over again and it may even be just going to a doctor's office, maybe not even related to cancer, but just going into the medical experience, what shows up in your system. I
Yeah,
really love.
it's really true. Like if there's such a thing as end of treatment, what there isn't for everyone, of course, but the fear of it coming back is very poignant and there's a lot of silence around it. You're not supposed to be worried about such things, right? But again, the loneliness, yeah.
Yeah.
And it can often, if it's untended, at least through research, it shows that either people can become extremely vigilant so that every little twinge in their body feels like, oh my God, cancer is coming back. Or people can go to the other side. They can just be like, never going to a doctor's office again, never driving my car past a hospital. And so how can we, accompany that too? And in a place where there's very little care, because you're supposed to be over it and you're supposed to be back to normal. And
Yeah. Well, everyone shows up at the cancer diagnosis and during the treatment, and then it's like, you know, everyone's gone after that. And I think that to have this, as you were saying, accompaniment
mm,
of someone who is still supporting you in this, and who is still helping you to navigate this even after the diagnosis and treatment, because it is such a lonely, lonely time. I'm speaking personally, but I've also I work with clients who have shared the same thing, that it's very, very lonely when you get through the treatment and you're on the other side, because everyone shows up at the beginning, and then it seems like so many people are not as present when you get to that place where you are actually starting to maybe even deal with the emotions that you weren't able to deal with in the moment when you were more in that survivor place. So I really appreciate just the talking about the receiving of care, and the support, the continued support that I think is so powerful and necessary and needed. I
mm.
did have a question that I wanted to ask, and that is, what did you learn about yourselves during this process of writing your book?
I don't want to write a book. I'm glad I did it. I'm really glad I did it.
It's intense.
It's intense. It really did. I wasn't, because this is also my first book, and I wasn't prepared for the intensity of it. I wasn't prepared for the time. It had a way of writing itself through us, I think. It really took that kind of embodiment to get it to come through. What else did I learn about myself? Well, I think I think I'm going to come back to pride, and that's a funny thing to say in a yoga community,
Mm.
but I it felt like we have a community and we can depend on each other. And it's not, some people would say it's not easy to do work in this area. I don't really agree with that. It's very human and beautiful and humbling and gorgeous and hard, all the things. And I think we need each other. And I think that this book began a community and a way of speaking about yoga therapy that I'm really happy is in the world, because it allows us to take care of ourselves as therapists, right? That we have this gorgeous yoga that helps us to be us and it helps us to be present for other people. And that, the way that these people, these yoga therapists came into the book was so beautiful and compassionate. And they just wanted to learn from each other and offer all of this into the world too. What about you, Leigh? What did you learn
I
about you?
love that. That's hard to follow. Um, what I learned is just sort of practical, is that writing a book is it's a business. And I guess I had this romantic vision of, oh, write the book, but it's all about deadlines. And it's all about, it's got to be within the structure. And I was just, I guess, very surprised about that. Um, and then we had to sort of pivot and work around that. Um, I totally agree that it became a beautiful community, that the contributors, many of them became very good friends through sitar, attending sitar and SIR and attending the Society for Integrative Oncology conferences. And it continues today, all these years later. Mm. Collaboration and again, I just can't say how grateful I was and what a blessing to have Anne next to me, because it would have been a very different book if Anne had not been at my side.
Well, me too. I mean, we had many, many meetings that were very, very hard
Mm.
and just didn't sometimes not knowing how to pick it up again because we were naive to it and we just got kind of thrown into it and feel pretty fortunate as a result. But at the same time, wow. I really don't say writing another book out loud in my home because my family would be unhappy about it.
I think it would be easier. I think this time it would be easier, much
Okay, well,
easier.
there's the next illusion for us.
Well, I'm so, for myself personally, grateful that you did write this book and that this resource is out there. I truly, truly, oops, I lost my AirPod. From my heart, feel like it's an amazing resource, and we're getting close to closing and opening up for Q&A. But I just have one last question. That is there anything else that feels important to share that you didn't get the opportunity to share?
Well, I'm very passionate about integrative oncology, and it's my great hope that more becomes possible all over the world, that we're not talking so much about silos, and that we, as practitioners, refer to each other and offer each other care, and that we develop a way of for people to land in oncology. It's, no one wants to be there. There are beautiful people there. They're so caring, but that we can care for each other in that way too. And that would be my enduring hope for sure.
Hmm, love that.
Yeah. I think, well, I'll just say one thing. Accessibility. We need to find ways to make yoga accessible to everyone. And yoga should be standard of care in comprehensive cancer care as supportive care. It just should be. And it should, so
Yeah,
that's
beautiful.
that's my hope, that the legacy of our book, it'll be the first step toward continuing the conversation about making yoga available for everyone who needs it or wants it.
Well,
Mm,
the evidence is there, right?
Mhm.
love
Yeah.
that. And so the invitation is to share this book with the medical community and cancer community. Yes, Anne and Leigh, as you're saying, it makes me even think, I've had this book as a resource, and then I'm thinking, because I have a family member that's navigating kind of going through treatment right now. And I'm thinking, oh, I should share this book with her oncologist. I should share this book with her radiologist. I should share this book. And it's making me think after this conversation, to, yeah, share this in my own personal life with those who are supporting, my loved one that's moving through that right now.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I'm just going to
Yeah.
add one thing. So I just came back from Harvard Medical School, where the Society for Integrative Oncology had their annual conference, their international conference on, all the therapies that come into play during supportive cancer care. And there was a oncologist from Australia, from Sydney, Australia, who was there. And she came up to me, Dr. Judith Lacey, and said, "Oh, your book, the book. We have just hired 3 yoga therapists, and we have used this book to help us plan out what our yoga department looks like at our cancer center." So yeah, you hear these
Mhm.
stories and you just, I get goosebumps, but yeah, share it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Anne and Leigh. Um, how can we find you? How can people, learn more about what you're offering? Is there anything that feels important about in terms of anything that you're offering now? We'll just segue into that before we go into the Q&A.
Okay. Easy to find, of course. But the one program that has come since, I do a lot of programs at the Cancer Center and really, really amazing work right now that's being brought with regard to lung cancer. So because cancer sometimes gets segmented into these different areas, and some are more supported than others, and lung cancer is not always central for funding and has some stigma around it. So lots of work in lung cancer right now. And also the enduring program that I'm doing is that year-long program, which is A Year to Breathe. Because I think that it's helpful for us to do our own work with regard to grief and with regard to dying, because then we have some agility and we can sit longer with people and we can turn up at the bedside, whether a yoga teacher or a yoga therapist or just a good citizen in the world, that we can come toward people who are suffering and we can come toward people who are dying in a good way, that it doesn't ask so much of us, it doesn't take us down. It's actually nourishing for us too.
Thank you, Anne.
Mhm.
I love that. So anyone, please feel free to reach out to me by email. It's my name at gmail.com or LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message. I don't offer any teachings. There is an integrative oncology textbook coming out in a couple of weeks. I think December the 1st. It's 500 pages, 65 chapters, and it's produced by, or it's edited by 2 oncologists, and there is a yoga chapter. And so there's more, and this is for clinicians. It's really, yeah, the language is for clinicians, but it's out there if you want to take a look at it or take it to your doctors and your hospitals and really promote yoga. Let's advance it.
Mm.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
that
Leigh.
work, Lee. That's amazing.
Yeah. I'll make an announcement before we uh, um, stop the recording and go to Q&A, that just be sure to sign up for our next offering, which is mid-November, with Lee Majewski and Dr. Bhavanani, another book on cancer. So cancer and yoga therapy. And yeah, just keep coming back, and please share if you see the sharing of our Women Writers Collective. Share it with your community. Um, there's amazing authors, amazing work that's out there, beautiful humans that are offering incredible work out there. So we'll go ahead and stop the recording. Stick around for the offering. And those of you who are not able to stick around, thank you for being here. So lovely to be in community with you. Thank you, Anne and Leigh.
And thank you to you, Shawnee, for bringing
Oh,
yourself to this work, and to Rachel and Leela and all the other people on the Writers Collective. We see you here, and we can't wait for your books to come.
absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been terrific. Look forward to more.
Yeah.